Can you beat Final Fantasy X by swapping classes with another character? So, what do I mean by this? In Final Fantasy X, each character has their own specific job or class, be it a white mage, a black mage, a warrior, etc, etc. And you level up on this game using a sphere grid. On the sphere grid, you move along the board and you gain abilities and stats that fit the character's purpose. So for a character like Lulu, she has high magic, and as you go through her sphere grid, she gets black magic spells and higher magic stats. What I want to do in this run is swap the characters that usually have high magic with a character that usually has high strength and see how difficult it becomes when everybody's stats and abilities are jumbled up. So with all that being said, I'm going to show you the rules that I've set up for this challenge. So the first rule is pretty self-explanatory. Every character must stick to the sphere grid that they have been assigned to. I am allowing people to use black magic spheres and white magic spheres and things like that to learn other techniques from different sphere grids, but they cannot change sphere grids until they have completed the one that they have been assigned. So I've banned Yuna from summoning any Aeons in this run because they're quite overpowered and it just makes the game way too easy. So unless the game forces you, like during the Isaru fight or against Belgamine, Yuna is not allowed to use the summon command. So the next rule is no overdrives. I created this rule mainly just to make the game a little bit harder, add a bit more challenge to it. I originally didn't have this as a rule, so like for the first part of the run, up until about the first Seymour fight, I am using overdrives, but as soon as I started to realise it was quite easy and that they were quite powerful, I decided to stop using them. So when the game ramps up in difficulty, we stop using overdrives. So the final rule is no overgrinding. I want this to be quite challenging, so I'm not going to stay in one area for a long time and just grind up levels. I do a little bit of grinding towards the beginning, but that's just to get people onto the right sphere grids. Then after that, we are just going through the game without stopping to fight loads of monsters and gain loads of levels. So now let's get into each character and how I've decided who they're going to swap with. So I want it to be as challenging as possible, so I tried to swap each character with another character that had very different stats and abilities to them. So the most obvious one to me was to swap Yuna with Auron. So Yuna has really high magic, MP, agility, magic defense, but low strength, HP and defense. And Auron has really high HP, high strength, high defense, but very low magic, MP, agility and magic defense. Auron is a character that benefits from having very high strength, which Yuna doesn't have. So it's going to be quite interesting to watch Yuna grow in strength and become this powerhouse. So now let's move on to our next magic dealer, which is Lulu. And I thought the best person to swap her with would be Waka, as he gains the second highest amount of strength stats in his sphere grid right after Auron. So I just thought it'd be fun to have Lulu and Yuna, who typically have the lowest strength, now be the highest strength characters. So Lulu's role is going to mainly be a status dealer. Because everyone's jobs have swapped, it's going to be harder for our characters to one-shot enemies. So Lulu's techniques of darkness, silence and sleep are going to come in handy because random battles are going to be a lot harder and you need these statuses to negate the enemies doing damage to you. Lulu towards the early game is very handy in just dealing statuses, and then in the later game when the strength starts to stack up, she actually becomes a very powerful character. This is the only direct swap I do. So Lulu is on Waka's sphere grid and Waka is now on Lulu's sphere grid. And the reason for that is that their stats are just so oppositional to each other, and it just made the most sense to me. Lulu's MP is the highest in the game and Waka's is the lowest, so it's going to be really hard for him to cast multiple black magic spells because he just doesn't have the MP to fund it. He doesn't have the lowest magic in the game, that goes to Auron and Tidus, but I just thought this would be the most fun way to do it. Now I didn't realise this at the time, but I actually added another layer of difficulty to this challenge. Because in the game there are certain enemies that are out of range from most characters, and the only people that can hit those out of range enemies are Waka with his Blitzball or Lulu with her black magic spells. But because Waka was covering both of these roles, it meant he was literally the only person that could deal with out of range characters. So next up is Tidus, who I decided to make our white mage and swap his sphere grid with Yuna. So their stats are quite different in terms of strength and magic. Tidus's is quite high in strength and Yuna's is very low. Tidus has the lowest magic in the game and Yuna has the highest. Tidus also has really low MP, so he can't really cast many white magic spells. They do have some similarities. They both lack defense, they both lack HP, and they both have pretty high agility. But aside from that, they're pretty different. Next up is Kimahri, who is quite difficult because in a regular run of this game, Kimahri can go to any sphere grid and become any character he wants. I had to just think about which one would be the most difficult for him, and I figured Tidus would be the most difficult. Kimahri has really high strength, defense and magic and low agility, and on Tidus's grid, he won't be able to utilize his high magic as Tidus doesn't have any offensive magic skills. And also towards the beginning of the game, a lot of Tidus's stat increases on his sphere grid are very low and barely boost at all, so it means that we can't utilize Kimahri's high stats as they won't be increasing quite as much as everyone else's will be. His main role will be to cast haste on the other characters, making him sort of like a time warrior. Next up is Auron, who actually has the lowest magic stat along with Tidus, so I could have given him Lulu's role, but then I didn't have anyone to give Riku's sphere grid to, and I figured the main component of Riku is that she has really high agility, and Auron has the lowest agility. Auron has really high natural HP, and Riku has really low natural HP, but she actually gains a lot of HP nodes in her sphere grid. So Auron's going to pick up on all of these and just have super high health, making him sort of like a thief tank, I've decided to call him. So the final character is Riku, who I've decided to sort of swap with Kimahri. Because Kimahri doesn't actually have his own sphere grid, it's hard for him to swap with anyone. But I've decided to make Riku a red mage, and she's going to float around between all the different sphere grids. So she's going to learn a few white magic spells, a few black magic spells, a few of Auron's techniques, Waka's. She's going to go around to each person and just learn the basics of all of them. One thing you could say that makes them opposite is that Kimahri has naturally very high stats when you first get him, and Riku has naturally very low stats when you first get her. So in this way, they do feel like opposites. Okay, so now that we've gone through every single role, here is a quick little recap of what each character's new role is. And yeah, without further ado, let's get on with the run. Okay, so this isn't the beginning of the game, but I decided to skip all that and get to the part where we have our main party ready, as the beginning part of this game is very slow and boring. Throughout the run, I'm also going to give you a few opinions on the story and what I think about it, and yeah, just go through each battle, how we strategized, and what changes we needed to do to prepare. So here we are at the Kilika Woods, and Yuna, after knowing Tidus for about 5 minutes, asks this.
I want to ask you to be my guardian.
To which Tidus responds with his usual answer of,
I'm just not really sure what's going on.
Also, this is a really old save that I just loaded up, and that's why Tidus is named that. I thought it was funny, it's not, but if we could just ignore that, would be great. Thanks! Let's go into our first mini-boss fight, which is against Lord Uchu. There's not really much to talk about in this fight. Our stats are all pretty much the same as when we started. Nobody has started leveling up into their other roles yet, so most people are exactly how they should be. Uchu likes to use Poison Claw ability, which poisons people. So we're going to use Yuna mostly to cure the poison and heal our party members, and then use a combination of Kimahri and Tidus to attack them. As you can see, I still use Kimahri's overdrives at this point. I hadn't set the rule to not use them yet. They don't really come in too handy in the beginning, so we do stop using our overdrives at some point. So Tidus is using cheer while Kimahri attacks, Yuna is healing. Another interesting thing is that each of these characters learn Lancet because they have to cut through Kimahri's sphere grid to get to other people's sphere grids. It means that all the characters end up having Lancet, and Lancet's a very helpful ability as it allows the mages in our party to get MP back, and because Tidus and Waka's MP is so low, you would find yourself having to waste a lot of ethers just to get back very minimal amounts of MP. But with Lancet, Tidus and Waka can simply draw MP from enemies and not have to waste as many ethers. So it's a very handy technique to have. Uchu's big attack is the Earthquake, which deals a good amount of damage to everyone, but not too much. And as you can see, Tidus missed, which I didn't even think was possible against Uchu, but I guess it's because we haven't leveled up at all. Tidus actually misses twice, which shocked me, and then he misses a third time, and then Kimahri misses. So it was getting a bit wild, so I bring out Lulu and just decided to use fire, which I should have done a long time ago, just to get the fight done quicker. So just a few more attacks from Kimahri and Tidus each, and then another Poison Claw, which we just ignore. One more attack, and Ochu is down. After saving the game, we venture through the woods. The battles here are pretty easy, so there's not really much to show you. I decide to test out Lulu and Yuna's strength, so Lulu does about 39 damage while Yuna does 31. So they're not very strong at all at the moment, so it's going to be interesting to see that grow. As we make our way to the temple, nothing much has changed. Everyone is still in their roles. Waka is killing the flying enemies and Lulu is killing the elementals, but that is all soon to change. Before we get into the next boss fight, I thought it'd be a good idea to cash in on some of the sphere levels we got from going through the woods. So now Kimahri has learned Cheer, and Waka has learned his first black magic ability, which is Blizzard. Lulu and Yuna haven't really progressed yet, they're still waiting to get to their sphere grid, and same with Tidus, he has not yet learned any white magic spells. Okay, time for the Sin Spawn fight. So we start off by taking out the two giant tentacles with Lulu's fire magic, and then it's time for Kimahri to test out his new ability, Cheer. And we do this with Tidus as well. So we have two people cheering, which is actually quite helpful as Cheer increases the strength of our characters and also reduces the amount of damage taken from enemies. What I like about this run is that it forces us to use techniques like this, because in a normal run you wouldn't usually use things like Cheer because everybody's stats are where they should be. But because our stats are going to be a bit messed up and we're not going to be as powerful as we usually are, using things like Cheer and Focus really help to boost our stats to where they need to be. So after the shell cracks, Kimahri gets poisoned by venom, which we use an antidote from Tidus to cure, sort of like he's practicing for when he becomes a white mage. The Sin Spawn uses his staccato ability, which doesn't do much damage thanks to all the cheers we've been doing. Then we just keep on wailing at him over and over again until he dies, using our most powerful spells from Lulu and our powerful attacks from Kimahri and Tidus. Tidus gets poisoned by venom, but we ignore it as we know we can finish it with a spiral cut, ending the fight. Before we get to the temple, we get this awesome scene of Lulu being a complete bitch to Waka, which I appreciate because Waka's a racist and he kinda deserves it.
I've been thinking.
Amazing. Simply amazing. Sin didn't take Chapu anywhere. Sin crushed him and left him on the Jose shore. It's pointless to think about it, and sad.
So we're about to enter the temple, but then we get ambushed by a group of homosexual bully athletes known as the Luca Goers, who just so happen to be Waka's biggest rivals in Blitzball.
You here to pray for victory too?
Us pray?
That's weird.
What's your goal this time? You gonna do your best again?
This time, we play to win.
Ooh, play away. Just remember, even kids can play, boys.
See you in the finals.
After we finish being bullied, we get thrown into the Cloister of Trials. We pick up the red armlet, which is a very useful armor for Kimahri, as it gives him some elemental protection. We then complete the trials, obtain Ifrit, who we never even end up using, and then test out Waka's new Blizzard ability. After that, we head to the boat where we get bullied by the gays again.
Oh right, you're that idiot.
We get bullied again, but this time by the voices in our head, and we learn the jack shot, which will actually come in handy later on when we get to Luca. So we arrive in Luca, but the bullying doesn't stop there. This time the entire city decides to let Tidus and the Oryx know that they ain't worth nothing. But Tidus has had enough, and he decides to stick up for himself, like he should.
Stop right there, goers.
The woman was too stunned to speak.
You guys are smiling now, but not for long. 'Cause this year, us Aurochs are taking the cup.
Now it's around this time that we get introduced to the main villain of the series, Maester Seymour. And for the most part, he does a really good job at being super creepy and menacing. Mostly because he likes to thrust his genitals into the camera. We pick up a magic sphere and a HP sphere from behind the docks, while Yuna repeatedly slams her face into a shipping container. Then, it's time to visit Iwaka, who provides some really overpowered weapons to us throughout the game. We pick up the stunning steel, which has slow touch. At this stage in the game, nobody has the slow ability, so having a weapon with slow touch on it makes our life so much easier when we're fighting random battles. And then, just before we can start the Blitzball match,
Kamari, Yuna's gone.
I wouldn't worry Tita, she seems to be taking good care of herself. We find out Yuna's been kidnapped and it's up to Kimahri, Tidus and Lulu to save the day. We also built a Thunder Spear for Kimahri, which is only really helpful for these enemies, but I figured why not. These fights against the robots are pretty easy. We just use Thunder with Lulu and attack with Kimahri and Tidus until they're dead. After killing all the robots, we make our way onto the Albed ship where it's time to fight the giant Blitzball robot machine. This thing's kind of stupid. Okay, so I bought those weapons from Iwaka to make this fight a lot easier. I thought if I got slow on him and used a Thunder Strike weapon on it, that it would go down a lot quicker. But to be honest, this crane is so busted that it wasn't even worth buying those weapons for this fight. The slow touch weapon does come in handy much later in the game as well, so it was good that I got that. But I did not need the Thunder Spear for Kimahri. The Blitzball machine thing likes to use this attack that makes you blind, which can be a bit annoying, but honestly, Lulu using Thunder and the crane doing about 4,000 damage to it made this fight super easy, so not much to report on here. We destroy the Blitzball machine, and Yuna is saved once again. Isn't that nice? After winning the fight, there's no time to rest, because Tidus has to win the Blitzball match against the Luca goers. We do actually really want to win this game, because you win a Strength Sphere if you win the match. So, the tactic against the goers is to basically stop them from ever shooting, because Keeper has really low shot. And we're off to quite a bad start here, because Grav goes for a shot, but luckily we had enough people to block it. And Jasu grabs the ball. As soon as Jasu has the ball, we want to set it to manual mode. Basically, during the first half of this game, it's very hard to score a goal because our stats are quite weak and we don't have any abilities. So in this first half, we are just passing the ball around, mainly between Letty, Jasu and Tidus, as these are the only three that are really any use to us. Datto is never going to be able to score, so don't bother passing it to him. Botta, it's okay to pass to Botta, but mainly Letty and Jasu and Tidus are the ones you want. Mostly Tidus, because he can learn Jet Shot, which is extremely powerful. So as you can see here, Tidus manages to level up to level 4, which is perfect. It means he has more HP to use Jet Shot, he's got more shot and a bit of endurance, so he should be able to score, but let's see how it goes in the second half. So we equip Jack Shot and then Grav catches the ball. Now, he is quite a powerhouse, Grav. He's got a lot of high stats, Grav, so he can be quite scary. As you can see, he goes for a shot and then Datto misses. I'm like, oh god, here we go. Keeper's gonna miss. Luckily, Keeper doesn't. He blocks the ball and it goes to Datto, who is pretty weak, but at least he has a lot of endurance, so he manages to take a hit and passes it to Letty, just because Letty was in a better position than Tidus. So we can take Bixen, no problem, and then we just pass it over to Tidus. So with Jet Shot, you can actually bypass 2 of the defenders. So I do this thinking it will do the strongest 2, but it does the weakest 2. The only one left has 8 block, and now I'm thinking, oh god. And then they block it, and then we just score with 1 shot remaining. So that was really risky. I was assuming that it would take out the top 2, but it took out the bottom 2 defenders, because you can only use Jet Shot once, because it costs 120 HP, and Tidus has about 200 HP. So I had 1 chance of that, and I nearly messed it up. Tidus gets the ball again, and then I think, you know what? I might as well go for a shot again. I'm already here. So we go for the shot, and it goes down to 2 and then to 1. And of course, the goalkeeper catches it. Now, The goalkeeper passed it to Abbas, and I'm thinking, oh god, but it's fine because there's a scripted part in the story where Walker comes out to help. Walker is also pretty good. You can, if I did miss the shot with Tidus, I could have just got Walker to score because he has Venom shot, which is very powerful. But we've already scored the goal. We've got the strength sphere, so we just decide to give Keeper a few kisses and then proceed to constantly kick him up the butthole until time is up. And there we go. We've earned our strength sphere. There's no time to celebrate the win though, because the Blitzball arena and Luca itself is being attacked by fiends. It never actually explains where these fiends come from. They just sort of appear and we're expected to kill them, and it never happens again, but that's fine. So at this stage in the game, Tidus should definitely be able to one-shot these fish monsters, but he can't. So it takes one hit each from Walker and Tidus just to kill one fish, which makes these fights a little bit annoying, but it's not too big a problem. We also get a lot of lucky crits in these fights, which really help to just get through it. Finally, we're introduced to the badass that is Auron, and Auron is honestly one of my favourite characters in this game. Him and Yuna have the best storylines in the game, and they just have so many great moments that they really make this game what it is. We murder the big birdie, and then it's time for possibly the coolest cutscene of the entire game. And I've got to give props to the art designers of this game, because whoever came up with the design of Animal must have been on some mad because it just looks insane. Like, what is it? It's just this giant beast with hands wrapped around it, chains coming out of it, and blood dripping from its eyes. Like, I remember when I first saw this as a kid, and I thought it was so terrifying but so cool. And it really sets up Seymour as this massive threat, because you know that even though he's a good guy now, he can summon this terrifying beast, which you know you're going to fight later on in the game, and it's going to be scary. Yeah, I love this cutscene. It's so cool to just see him wipe out everything. It really shows off his power, what Seymour can do, the presence that he has. It makes him a really, really cool villain. Back to the plot though, and we learn that
Sin is checked.
And then Tidus is all like,
No, that's ridiculous. No way. I don't believe you.
and then he has a quick little giggle with Yuna. And then it's time to use the strength sphere we got on both Lulu and Yuna. Since they're at the same point in the sphere grid, it means they can both utilize the strength sphere, which will just help boost them along. I also give them both the HP sphere as well, just to give them a bit more lastability and really get them into their roles of Waka and Auron's sphere grids. And now with Auron in our party, I wanted to see how long it would take him to get to Riku's grid, and it turns out it would take 17 sphere levels to get him over to Riku's grid. So we've got a long way until Auron properly becomes the role that he's supposed to be, but until then, let's keep on going.
And Guardians, don't forget to smile.
So before we go through the Mihan Highroad, I decided to do a little bit of grinding. I know in the rules I said I wasn't going to grind too much, but I just wanted to get 5 sphere levels to get Auron a little bit closer to where he should be on Riku's sphere grid. As you can see here, my highest damage dealing characters, Tidus, Auron and Kimahri, are still barely doing over 100 damage. Auron does a little bit more, just over 200, but it's still not enough at this stage in the game, so I just decided to get a few levels here. Okay, so now it's time to spend those sphere levels. Auron gets 2 plus 200 HP spheres, and he also learns haste on his way to Riku's grid. Tidus is finally a white mage, he's learnt cure, he's learnt Ezuna, and I decided to put a magic sphere there so that Waka can also access it on his grid, so they both get the +4 magic. Not too much has changed with Kimahri. His stats are quite low at this stage. He manages to learn Flee, which we don't use too often because I try not to run away from many fights. And then onto Yuna's grid, she finally learns Guard, so she's officially on Auron's. And Lulu's accuracy and strength goes up, and she also learns Silence Attack. Waka learns the rest of his black magic abilities, and he gets that +4 magic which he got from Tidus earlier. I also decided to give Waka the MP sphere, mainly because he's a black mage. He's going to be using a lot more spells than Tidus does, and so having 40 extra MP is going to be really handy going through the Mi'ihen Highroad. Let's take a look at their stats after we've leveled them up. So Auron has still got the highest damage of everyone in our party and also has really high HP. He hasn't yet developed his agility to Riku's level yet. Kimahri's stats haven't really changed much since he's on Tidus's grid. It hasn't increased his stats very much. Now that Tidus has Cure, we can actually put that 11 magic to good use. His MP is still at 12 though, so he's not very useful. He can cast like 2 Cure spells, I think, at this stage. Waka's stats are looking a little bit better. He has 14 magic and 70 MP, plus fire, blizzard, water, and thunder. He's turning into quite a good black mage. Yuna still has 9 strength, so she's not going to be killing anything anytime soon. Similarly, Lulu has 12 strength, so she's doing a little bit better than Yuna, but that accuracy is at 7, so she won't be killing flying monsters like Waka does. And I wanted to show you this fight here against 2 bombs and the big horned guy, which I believe is called the Jewel Horn. And I just want to show you how weak we are. So essentially the only things that can kill the bombs are 2 of Lulu's blizzard spells and then a powerful attack from either Kimahri or Tidus or Auron, as they have the highest strength. But they deal so much damage to us, and that's one thing I find a lot in this run, is that we take way more damage than we usually do in a normal run. Waka's HP, as you can see, goes all the way down to 91, and he has over 800. It's just a couple attacks and boom, you're right the way down into critical. This happens a lot. I found myself healing a lot more than I usually do. But yeah, this is just a random encounter, and you can see how tricky and long the fight is. The Jewel Horn is really deadly, but having Lulu and Waka both know Dark Attack comes in so handy, because this Jewel Horn is such an issue. It does so much damage, and having it blind means that we just don't have to worry about it ever dealing damage to us. You can see here Auron is testing out his new haste ability, which isn't on Riku's grid, but we had to pass through Tidus's grid to get to Riku's grid, so that's why Auron has haste. And it makes sense for his character because he's supposed to be a thief, he's on Riku's grid and he's all about higher agility. I kind of don't mind him having haste. But yeah, you can see here the fight has taken a long time, and if this happens 2, 3, 4 times, then it's taking a long time to get through this part of the game. Yuna is still healing, her magic is a lot higher than Tidus's, and as you can see, Tidus has 8 HP at the moment. He's not going to become an effective white mage until he gets at least a couple of MP spheres. But yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that fight, just to show you how long it takes us, how much we have to heal, and how little damage we do in general. After some more casual racism from Waka,
but this isn't our bed shop.
Is that a problem?
I'm not tired one bit.
Well, I am.
it's time to use up some of the sphere levels that we gained by going through the Mi'ihen Highroad. Now, this is where the game actually starts to get interesting. As you can see, Yuna is learning more strength and HP based stats, while Tidus and Waka are gaining more magic based stats, so you can really start to see the changes in their classes now. Also, Kimahri learns haste, which is awesome. Now, the best way to test out our new stats is by fighting the Chocobo Eater, and this guy wants to stay blind as long as possible because he can deal quite a lot of damage. So I use Dark Attack, and I also use Power Break, so even if he breaks out of the darkness, he still won't do much damage. As you can see, he manages to break through the darkness and deals 450 damage to Auron. Now, Auron has a lot of defense, and the Chocobo Eater's strength has been decreased thanks to Power Break, so the fact that it's still doing 450 damage shows how underpowered we really are. We managed to push the Chocobo Eater back, but he soon retaliates and pushes us right back again. We're still using Tidus's Overdrive, which does just over 400 damage, so not very impressive. And once again, we're getting darkness on him. We're using our strongest damage dealers, which is Kimahri and Auron, along with Waka using fire. We could have used Lulu as her magic stat is higher, but I wanted Waka to feel useful, so you know, I let him cast fire on the Chocobo Eater. Now, I should have done this at the start of the fight, but I just remembered that Auron and Kimahri both had haste, so I make sure I get that on both of them, and then just continue to attack and attack. Now you can see here also that Kimahri's red armlet comes in handy, because the Chocobo Eater likes to counterattack sometimes with Blizzard, and as you can see here, it does about 100 damage to Kimahri and 200 damage to Auron. So that's a nice 50% reduction on elemental damage. After taking a lot of damage, I think it's time to bring Yuna in and heal up Kimahri and Auron, while they just continue to attack. They both have piercing weapons, which means that they can get through enemy armors, meaning they're the best two to really fight the Chocobo Eater. We really want Yuna to get a piercing weapon, because then that means that she will properly feel like she is on Auron's sphere grid. So as soon as we get Riku and we can customize weapons, I will be trying to get piercing for Yuna. We decide to ride the Chocobo to avoid any more random encounters, and then we make our way to the Mushroom Rock Road.
From the first time I laid eyes on him, I never did like Seymour. But you know, some of the things he said that day, they made a lot of sense to me.
We pick up an armor for Tidus from a Waka called the Metal Shield, just to give him a bit of a defense boost. So the fiends on Mushroom Rock Road aren't too difficult for us. They're not too big a step up from Mi'ihen Highroad, they're quite basic. But there is this one enemy, which is the little mushroom fire thingy-majingy that likes to use pollen. So if you don't kill this thing in one hit, it decides to automatically counterattack with a move called Pollen. And what Pollen does is it puts your party to sleep. But if there are no enemies left that can do physical damage to you, then you can't come out of sleep. Where, as you can see, everyone falls asleep, and the only two enemies left are a fire elemental and the Pollen dude. So they just use fire on us and get our HP down really low. Thankfully, the sleep doesn't last too long, and we can get our health back to where it needs to be and kill them off. But yeah, at this stage in the game, Lulu should be able to one-shot these enemies with fire, so you don't have to worry about the counterattack. But because she hasn't been getting any magic stats due to being on Waka's grid, she can't one-shot the enemies with fire. Now, the whole point of black mages in this game is that they can one-shot these elemental enemies. But as you can see, Waka is doing just over 200 damage, which is nowhere near enough to kill these elementals. He ain't one-shotting anything anytime soon. Now we get pretty lucky. We only get hit with pollen twice going through the Mushroom Rock Road. This here is the second time, and as you can see, we get super lucky and only Yuna gets slept, and we manage to just kill it off with Auron. We make it to the end of the Mushroom Rock Road and prepare ourselves for one of the hardest battles in the early game, in my opinion. So Tidus has finally got some magic and MP, so we can actually use Cure effectively. Not much really changes for Waka. We get focus. I feel kind of sorry for Auron not getting many stats, so I give him the Fortune Sphere, and he's now getting very close to Riku's grid. Lulu learns aim and sleep attacks. Now she has silence, sleep and darkness, which is brilliant. Yuna learns magic break and gets some agility, and Kimahri is still chugging along. Now, this is a very important shop. We want to buy the TKO for Waka because it's such an overpowered weapon. It has Stone Touch, which this early in the game, a lot of enemies aren't immune to stone. So when things get too tough, you just bring out Waka, hope for the best, throw your blitz ball, and instant death.
Death to all of them.
It's so good that it feels like cheating, but it's not cheating, it's in the game at this stage. So we're using the TKO for most of this run. As you can see, we're also selling off almost everything we own just to buy Auron's sentry weapon. It has initiative, which increases your chance of preemptive strikes, and that just feels like a thief ability to me, so it was quite fitting to give that to Auron, even though it is really expensive for not a very good effect. We send Garter off to his doom. Now it's time for one scary motherfucker. This Sin Spawn boss creates a shift in the game where we start to see the difficulty ramp up just a little bit. There are 3 sections of the Sin Spawn that you can attack: the 2 arms, the head and the stomach. You cannot attack the stomach until both the arms are gone, and you need piercing to get through the armor. Kimahri and Auron's strength hasn't increased very much, so it's going to take them a few hits just to get the arms down. Also, the head can only be hit by Waka and Lulu's magic. He also deals a lot of damage. He can do Demi, which cuts everyone's HP down by 3/4, and his physical attacks do a whopping 600 to 700 damage, depending on the character. Our tactic going in is to destroy the head as quickly as possible by using overdrives and by using some black magic spells. We also use Oren to cast haste on himself and the other party members and destroy those arms as quick as possible. Whenever it says the head is moving suspiciously, you want to attack it immediately, so it can't use any powerful attacks on us. So as you can see here, boom, 732 damage on Oren knocks him out. We send in Yuna because she has a lot of HP and she has the ability to cure. So she's actually in a better position than she would be on a normal run because she can cast healing spells and can still survive due to her high HP. But she doesn't have life, so we do have to rely on Phoenix Downs if she goes down. At this stage in the game, it's possible that Lulu would have learnt her level 2 black magic spells, but we do not have that privilege, so we just have to slowly chip away at his massive health until he goes down. Once we get haste on everyone, it means we get enough turns in before they attack and don't have to heal as much, which is really good. But again, the amount of damage he's dealing is such a problem because after every hit, we have to cure. And Yuna's magic hasn't increased. The cure is only healing about 600 while he can deal 700. And then at this point, the arms regenerate for a second time. I'm like, oh god, here we go again. Because they have 800 HP, and that means Oren would have to attack 3 times just to kill one arm. And it just takes a long time. Even with haste, it takes a while. And then there's also the threat that he could die and have to be revived. So yeah, it's quite annoying. Luckily, we get his overdrive and we use that to make the process a little bit quicker, but it doesn't attack the head, so I'm getting desperate at this point. I bring in Waka to use his overdrive because I know that that will hit both the head and the stomach, and hopefully just get the head out of the equation, because as soon as the head goes, it makes the fight much more manageable and less of a stress. We do a good chunk of damage to both of it, and then Lulu uses one more black magic spell to get the head down. Finally, now we can bring out Kimari to use haste on himself. Now, Kimari is good because he has high strength, he has haste, but the issue with him is that his HP is so low. I'm not sure if he can survive a physical hit from this enemy. I use Cheer to boost our defense and strength a bit, and then I send in Tidus as our white mage, mainly because my thought behind it was, when there's no healing that needs to be done, I can use Tidus to cast Cheer, and then I can just focus Oren and Kimari on attacking. So you see me start to do that here. But again, it was risky because Tidus's HP is so low. And then once again, the arms come back, and I'm thinking, right, this is getting ridiculous. Luckily, we get a critical hit, and it means that Tidus can finish off one of the arms, which was so good. It meant we only needed 2 hits to get rid of that arm. And then the second arm takes 3 hits. We're getting in the stride now. We've got a Cheer off. We're looking healthy. The head is down. Now it's just time to get the job done. So, this part here, it attacks and goes for Kimari. And I'm like, oh god, here we go, he's dead. The Cheer is going to be worthless. And he survives on 1 HP. That is madness. So if it wasn't for that Cheer earlier, he wouldn't have survived that. And then, if it wasn't for that Fortune Sphere that we gave Oren earlier, he wouldn't have been able to get 2 critical hits in a row off on the arms, meaning they each took 1 hit to get down. So, I was feeling like the preparation that I'd done for this fight was paying off and things were going smoothly. And I was worried that this would be the first game over we got, and that doesn't look like it's going to happen, which is lovely. Now we're just getting to the home stretch. We get another critical hit from Oren, which is awesome. He's super lucky. Even Yuna's doing over 100 damage at this point. We're looking good. And it's just about getting in the final hits before he finally goes down. So it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, but that's mainly because of the overdrives. And although we got lucky, I don't think we would have got a game over had we not used overdrives. Mainly because the issue with this battle was just speed. It was just taking longer than it should have. And then we actually have to fight the Sin Spawn again after a cutscene, but I'm not going to go into it too much because Seymour is super powerful. He has level 2 black magic spells. We cast a lot of those. He dies. And yeah, I feel like that's a good place to end the first part of this video. So I'm going to try and upload these every week so you can keep up to date with this run. It gets a lot more interesting as time goes on because the battles get harder and harder and we have to use different tactics to get through it. So stick around for part 2 and I will see you all again soon. Bye bye.